welcome to Talking Tech with Legal IT Insider. I'm your host, Caroline Hill, and today I'm here to talk about the implementation of Thomson Reuters CoCounsel at Acuity Law, and I'm joined by Claire Cooper, who is Transformation Lead and a solicitor at Acuity. Hi, Claire.
Hi, Caroline. Nice to see you.
So nice to see you. Thank you for joining me. So we're actually going to do two podcasts. This is podcast one, where we're going to be looking at the use of CoCounsel at Acuity. So we're going to be looking at the current state of play and their innovation approach. We're going to be talking about how CoCounsel has been onboarded. So Acuity is very much ahead of the curve with this, and Claire's been very much at the forefront of that. So we're going to be talking about how, because as we know, implementing new tech is not easy. So how their journey has been so far and the kind of steps that they've taken. Tell me, so Claire, were you involved from the very beginning of CoCounsel's selection and rollout?
In a way. So I arrived at Acuity Law in kind of end of July time, and in the October we were building up to our first test of CoCounsel. So before I got there, they had been speaking with Thomson Reuters on what they wanted to do, what could they achieve with this new technology, and how we were going to kind of test it out. So I was there sort of at the beginning, and kind of got into a space quite quickly of taking over the program from the kind of experience I've had in the past, and being able to kind of lead the way with how we wanted to approach this new technology.
Yeah, I know it's been a sort of steep journey, like but you know, you've been, you know, it's great to see you leading it, and as I said, you know, you're very much, I think people have got a lot to learn from Acuity, so it's great to have you here. Talk to me first about when you've had some sort of learnings around onboarding. You've done some major upgrades. I know you've introduced new features. Just briefly talk me through that.
So I think if I start from a place of where I found Acuity, then we historically, like a lot of mid-size and I'd imagine smaller law firms, have not got a lot of access to data. We haven't got a lot of access to interoperable systems. And so you find a lot of the information that you need, or the systems that you want to talk to each other, don't do the thing. And even if you can get to that data, it doesn't necessarily give you that additional information that you want. So quite quickly, it was clear that to be able to kind of take the decisions that we needed to, we were going to have to do this in a very, I know agile gets overused quite a lot, but in an agile way, because we were going to have to build as we went. I'm quite open to doing that because I've come from a background of scaling businesses, in particular in tech. So it's quite the norm for me. But I suppose going through this journey with the fee earners, it wasn't the norm for them, but they've done a really amazing job of kind of holding on tightly, as I kind of said, let's just keep going, you'll be fine. And I think luckily, because the tech has improved significantly, you know, we were very early adopters back in October 2025. It was version 1.0 of Core. It's not even comparable to where we are today. And because they could see those changes in the technology, it really kept them incentivized. So it was a bit of an all-rounder. But once we'd kind of tackled, the data position, and that we didn't really have kind of embedded processes, and so we were building all of that right at the beginning and trying to decide, you know, who goes first, how do we do this, how do we test, what does the scorecarding look like for that, how do we kind of keep alignment of everybody involved, because, and Rob, the COO, has been very open about this, there's been legacy tech failures like many other law firms. We've never really kind of stuck the landing on any tech, and so it was very much so, not only is this an expensive adventure, but also it's AI and it's a law firm. So there was a lot of different kind of expectations rolled into, can we get this right, and how are we going to do that? And for us, that was about, one, staging the rollout, so making sure that we weren't trying to tackle everybody at once. We were kind of very slowly and creatively building our use cases and making sure that they did the thing we wanted them to do before we moved on to the next piece and then the next team, and adjusting as we went. So it was very much so a case of pivoting. And again, that's another overused word, but we had to, it was as we kind of went through, we've learned where the limitations of the technology was, and we learned the limitations of the teams and the expectations as well. So it was all very much so in the moment. And now what is nice is that we've gotten to a stage of flipping that. And so we're working much more closely with Thomson Reuters in a proactive space where we're taking the new upgrades or the pre-releases and we're testing and we're finding the limitations first, ready for rollout. But at the beginning, that was very much so. It was an option of we either wait and we do that, or we get involved and we take advantage of being the first to test this in the market, or amongst the first to test.
Yeah, I mean, with your background, that I know the word agile is probably overused, but it's it's also important to understand why that's worked in this context.
Yeah.
So you very much did it by, how did you decide who to start with? You obviously you did it by practice area, or how did you decide?
Yeah, we did it by practice area, and the first version 1.0 was much more aligned to the litigation teams for use cases. And we also had the ability to just get in front of those teams that little bit more. The partners were that little bit more supportive maybe, and just kind of ready to go, and had tested other technology in the past. So they made a lot of sense as our initial team. So we started with commercial litigation team, then moved out to 2 other litigation teams, and then tackled non-contentious. And we wanted to do that last because we wanted the ability to do that kind of high volume due diligence review piece once we knew the capability of the technology. At the beginning, you don't need that so much with the litigation teams, but by the time we got to the non-contentious ones, we really needed to understand what was happening. And they also just had that slightly less bandwidth as well. So it was trying to kind of understand who and how. But to be honest, it was very much a case of, let's start somewhere, and let's not try and perfect this too much. Let's just see who can give it a go. This looks like the closest match. We didn't have data saying to us, this is the perfect scenario, or this is the best use case. It was quite startup-like, as you can say. It's a bit scrappy in the beginning, but we definitely kind of found our feet quite quickly once we got up and running.
I like that, and I think that's the only way to go. This is all new, right? So this is new to everybody.
Yeah.
So you start. So fine. So you start, and you were working quite closely, obviously, with the fee earners, trying to find. So obviously, trialing. Is it fair to say? So trialing the tech, getting their feedback, and also finding the use cases.
Yeah, so mapping out their processes is where we started. So it was a very high level jobs to be done. So what does it look like in the day of the life of a lawyer when you're looking at a litigation program from start to end, and where roughly do most cases land, and most don't get to litigation. So it was trying to kind of understand where we were going to really find value with CoCounsel. And so we developed kind of early phase scorecards that are kind of edited across time now, and so we've got a much sleeker version of events, which only takes a couple of clicks to kind of complete. But at the beginning, we were trying to kind of find our grounding and what was important data, and what kind of feedback did we want to get from the team. So some of it was very much so back to basics and trying to get a sense of what do they do in their day, where can we start with the most value, and then letting them kind of build their confidence and creativity. And you have to, I suppose, remember at the same time that all of this is happening is the upgrades are coming in at the same time. So they're in a space where they're having to also test an awful lot. So once they get used to something, the next upgrade is coming through, and that's brilliant. but it also means that they've got to shift gears again. So we've been quite careful to try and make sure that we minimize fatigue, which is not simple when they're also trying to hit their, their billing quotas and making sure that they're also doing their BD work. There's an awful lot of expectations on fee earners, and I think that's partly one of the reasons why legacy tech has failed so much inside law firms, and it's making sure you've got that right pace for them to be able to do what they need to do.
Yeah, 100%. And so you've done a couple of things to try and help, and one of them is, I know you've done a hackathon, and it's funny because years ago hackathons were a big thing, and now they're sort of becoming more important. I mean, I know they've always been important. You've been involved in the tech world, but in legal tech they became a huge thing, and then everyone kind of overdid it, and now they're realizing the huge value in terms of connecting people and really working together in that kind of fast-paced way, and it's kind of fun as well. So you've done that. And also I know, in terms of the output side, you've also been building precedent prompts, in litigation and property. So perhaps we start with, so it's a multi-prong attack on sort of A, further ways to establish use cases, and B, a way to help fee owners with the adoption side of things that you were just talking about, which is really, where it's hard because people's time is precious. So talk me through the hackathon first. So tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so the hackathon was in February of this year, and Thomson Reuters came on site, and so we had myself, Charlotte, Henry, and Sabia, who were kind of monitoring the teams and trying to kind of make sure that everything was going well and hosting the event. We did a setup of a scenario, which was an M&A, which we essentially kind of mirrored the type of work that we would normally do. We had a mixture of fee earners from across all different teams. So some of them might have done a seat in corporate in the past, but maybe not. So some of it was quite new. And we took a case for them to be able to kind of play out and be able to actually try and develop worked examples. So they had a number of questions or scenarios that they had to kind of tackle as a team. And then we split them out into 3 or 4 teams. And at the end, they were judged by, I think it was the chairman, COO, and Henry. So they got into a space of being able to present as well. So it wasn't, so some of it was about them getting stuck and then having someone help them with the prompting and kind of talking them through, look, have you thought about doing this? Have you thought about doing that? And sometimes it's really basic things. And on other occasions, it's a bit more complex and the tech isn't quite where it needs to be. And it's having that conversation too, that there are limitations because it's early stage technology. But also then having to present at the end to the chairman in particular, I think was a really nice add-in for us, because it just meant that, one, they got a bit of credibility and visibility in the right kind of person in front of them, but also being able to kind of talk through what you've done and what you've achieved embeds what your learnings are in a different kind of way. And I think a lot of the feedback that we had, in particular from some of the junior members that were there, was that really helped them shape their sense of what this could achieve and what this could do, because they were talking amongst their peers and trying to kind of, as a team, tackle this. Whereas what can happen a lot with this type of technology is that it's a very siloed endeavor, and that's not always very helpful. And it's not until you can kind of bring people into group conversation settings where you can get them to say, oh, that's why it does that too. Oh, I've only ever used it for this. And it's that kind of natural way of learning that you can't achieve when they're just sat in front of their laptop.
That's really interesting. I wish to say Henry's from Thomson Reuters, and he's obviously been helping you with the implementation. And then with the precedent prompts. So this is something I've seen firms doing, because it's that way of showing fee earners, this is how other people. It's a similar sort of concept, really, isn't it? But it's sort of creating a bank so that fee owners can look at what's working for other people. It also can help drive consistency. So talk me through what you've been doing in building precedent prompts.
So it started off quite practical, so kind of moving from the jobs to be done into just 1 or 2 lines of prompting and kind of learning from Thomson Reuters. Here are trigger words in particular. So if you want to hone in on a particular way, you have to use a particular word. And then sentence structure, the kind of the general prompt building that you'll see on LinkedIn, how to structure it to get the most out of things. And then learning what worked for us, and then adapting with the technology, because through each upgrade, we're in a position where some things used to work, now they don't. And so you're having to kind of move with it, which is fine. And it's just making sure that everybody understands that's the type of flow that they should expect. And once we got into some more of the complicated, so we split our training into a simple onboard and a complex onboard. And so simple onboarding is for teams that we know that they will be able to get into the process and the kind of the use very, very quickly. And as long as they've got enough wraparound training, tech champions and support from me, I kind of helicopter in as and when needed. That's how they kind of approach things, and they have like self-help guides and things like that. And then the complex onboarding are things like corporate and real estate, where we need to kind of develop real finer kind of or deeper prompts, where they're not essays, but they're very close for some elements. And it's kind of tracking end to end, what do you need for each stage and each particular use case within whatever task you're doing. And so a lot of those got built out with the teams through pilots or projects. We weren't very strict on purpose, so I had a lot of inbuilt flexibility. The board weren't pushing for any kinds of results from it. It was very much so, if the fee earners need to reschedule, you reschedule. There's no pressure on. And so it took quite some time to build up. And then now what we have is a use case library, which has all of the team's prompts by specific requirement. And then we also have the general prompts. So there's a lot of agnostic prompts that will help. For example, one of the CoCounsel core skills is drafting. So an email or a letter or whatever you want it to be. But it's a very specific way of trying to get CoCounsel to not only build up to being able to do that, but then how do you want that output completed? So a lot of the work is now in digital form, which is great. And next is an upgrade from Thomson Reuters, which will be actually kind of being able to embed the prompts inside of CoCounsel core, which will be even better, because it means then we just know that everybody's got what they need right in front of them. At the moment, it kind of requires them to go to the place that we need them to go to and then use it. So it's nice to see the technology evolving to help us, as much as us having to kind of evolve with it.
And then just in brief, so in terms of adoption, so I know you've well, actually this is not the same thing, but you've rolled it out to all employees and fee earners, right? So this is across the whole
full-time employees that are fee earners, yes.
Okay. And we're going to come on in podcast 2, so everyone come go and watch us there.
Don't go away.
Yeah. We're going to talk about ROI, and we can probably talk a little, so that will naturally talk a little bit more about adoption there, because I think we're actually unfortunately at time. But Claire, so great to chat to you. I really appreciate you doing taking the time to talk about this, because this process, I feel like the process is where it's at. Like if you can get the process right, it's complicated, but if you can if we can listen to other people's experiences in terms of what they've found to work, then I think that's super helpful. So I really appreciate you making the time to speak to me.
No, thank you very much for having me, and I really enjoy being able to help, I hope, other law firms, and that's what we want more than anything else, because this doesn't work unless everybody gets behind something like this and learns from each other. So I think it's great to be able to be invited into this. So thank you.
Thank you.